Hi, I'm Zach,
And I'm Mike.
and we're from the Lorebreakers, and today's episode is Gather Round as we spin a tale. Remember the last second, then?
Yeah, remember that one last second. You nearly fucked up the tape. Well done.
No, I almost said the original name of this episode, which is I've heard a rumour.
Yep. So,
Today's episode, continue.
yeah, what are we chatting about this week? What we're chatting about is basically all the little stories, the nitbits, the little tricks and tales that can be spun around a campfire that can sort of make your world seem bigger than it is.
Or just little plot elements you can do, like some walking through a hallway, notice a painting, goes, oh, that's the Treaty of Ghostwood, or insert event here that happened to kind of go, okay, I wonder what that's actually about. And maybe just put a bit of like plot deals going, oh yeah, that's when two warring factions fought in the woods, almost burnt it down, and almost ruined the ecosystem that they both need to survive. So they signed a treaty not to fight near the woods and set it with one-on-one combat or something.
Yeah, there's got to be cover not to reach into the realms of an expedition done. But
Oh yeah, defo.
yeah, but honestly, but there's lots of ways you can sort of slip it in there. I mean, we all remember very fondly, was Ben Kenobi chatting about the Clone Wars, or
Darth Sidious talking about the legend of Darth Plagueis.
yeah, it's just just little things you can do that make they go, hold on a minute, I remember that.
Should we just say most of Star Wars is like stuff they don't expand on? They just go, oh, this thing happened. So anyway, the actual main plot.
I mean, to be fair, it's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, George Lucas is great at that shit.
Yeah, I mean, how many times can you say, wow, George Lucas, well done?
Oh, world building, he is amazing at that shit.
Oh no, absolutely. But as everyone tends to get focused on how good or how bad the movies were.
Sand. I don't like sand.
Sand.
They focus too much on his dialogue and not like the actual world he crafted. But that's a side track. That's a side thing. That's going to be a side episode of bitching about people.
Yeah, exactly. But no,
So, go on.
I'm just leading. I'm just trying to get into the next bit, which is just, I don't know, like we're just sort of chatting shit about all these little like twists and tales and bits of expedition you can sort of drip grab into your world. I mean, we've just chatted shit about the way Star Wars have done it, but you know, what do you think is one of your favorite ways of which it's been done?
Avatar.
Listen,
Avatar does it pretty well too.
yeah, no, it does. They do. It expands upon it quite well. Just,
I mean, ignoring Avatar 1, you've got the previous 4 Avatar states, but I can't remember the names of before Aang, where they give you enough details about them before expanding upon a little bit. And then you also get bits here and there of Avatars before them in the cycle, as well as one's the most famous one because he gets the most development for a single episode to focus on how the Avatar came to be. But
there's also Kyoshi as well.
Yeah.
Avatar Roku, is it the one before Aang?
Yeah. All the spirits too, they expand on the lore because they have interacted with avatars in the past and talk about Aang about how he's different from them.
Yeah, just sort of finding out all the little different ways that they've that they sort of expand upon. Who were these past lives of Aang? What were they like? I know later on in the series that we actually get to see these avatars in action, but just before you ever reach that point, it's just finding out these little bits and pieces about them, like when they go to is it Kyoshi Island? Or is it, I don't know if that's the right name of the island, but like finding out that Kyoshi was such an interesting character and such a dramatic character in her time that she literally spawned an entire culture based around imitating her.
Oh, you've forgotten how that started. She separated that island from the Earth Nation because she hated the Earth Emperor at the time.
Yeah, she broke off the island, just fucked off into the ocean.
And he fell to his death, I believe.
Did he? Yeah, you're right, he did. The cliff he was on collapsed.
How was that for a fucking, like, fuck this, I'm out? Oh!
You think after that, it's like, oh, he just died. Well, bring the island back.
Or, the next emperor, got the avatar, was like, maybe I should kill this guy in a mountain or a volcano.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, that works.
But no, yeah, you're right. Avatar is a great way of doing it. I suppose, it's sort of expanding upon that, and
I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it is a definitely good example to use for like one a lot of people have a grasp on.
Well, go on. What would you say is your favorite?
Ooh, that's probably a hard one because there's so many just kind of little things, stories, like a lot of stories that I like have this kind of baked in that you don't really think about. It's just kind of they throw a dialogue away and you kind of think, I wonder what that is. But anyway, I need to focus on the main story. I'd say I'm gonna go to old hat here, but Sly Cooper. I'm going over hat for this one.
I knew it. You know what? I knew eventually we'd get on the Sly Cooper. You'd find a way to slip that shit in.
Hey, I'm going to slip this in smoothly. So, in game, there's a book
Go
called
on,
The
I'm
Thievius Raccoonus. Fucking hell, give me The Thievius Raccoonus. Oh, let's try and say that 3 times fast. And in it, you have mentions of all the previous Coopers that have held the book and been famous thieves. So you got Tennessee Kid Cooper and the like, because I'm drawing a blank now because I'm trying to keep the dialogue going.
Yeah.
And Sir Gallant and all that. And you get kind of tidbits here and there of like what they added to the legacy of the Coopers, what they're most famous for. You kind of also get to see the visual style and how they interact with their world. Sure, they're thieves, but what do they bring to the thieving table? So Tennessee Kid Cooper brought the slide mechanic in for the gameplay wise. So you jump on the wires and stuff, and you just naturally slide along or go around tracks. He brought that in. I can't remember if it's Roshi or not. It's gonna annoy the shit out of me. The Japanese ancestor, he introduced the ninja spiral jump. So if you know, there's like point, like say the spiky bit of this radiator here, he could jump and hit the circle button. That's a thing in universe, by the way, and latch onto it perfect like a ninja.
So it's sort of the idea of like it's sort of demonstrating how even the gameplay mechanics are sort of like they've sort of emerged from very little story elements and sort of like how so where did this technique come from? This technique come from? This technique come from?
In the first game, there's more pages you get of the Thievius Raccoon because the entire thing is about getting that. And when you get a tiny bit of the Thievius Raccoonus, you get a bit of an exposition going like, oh, this is from my ancestor who was this person, and this is how they introduced this technique because they needed to avoid this thing. So it introduces like an element in, so like the one that's basically a fighter jet pilot introduces that. If they fall off a cliff or something like that, they can jump back without losing a life, which is an in-game reason for that mechanic existing, but they've also given a in-world reason. It's like, yeah, that makes sense for a person that was probably jumping out of the sky a lot to figure a technique out how not to die by jumping out of like airplanes and stuff.
So they figured out genetically how to stop dying when they fall out of airplanes.
And how not to drown.
Okay, there's some bullshit going on here.
Yeah, it's just to explain gameplay mechanics. They get drops for the most part in the second game because they introduce an actual health meter rather than, say, the classic platform thing of one hit, one death.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, to be fair, that is a way of doing it. I think it would be sort of interesting if you came across, I don't know, like relics of past Coopers. I know you've probably got them hidden in a hideout, but like...
Kind of, but you also say, in the second game and the third game, you can collect items like treasures around the map and bring them back to the hideout, and for the most part, they don't really add world stuff in. The fourth game, though, the one that's the most controversial in the series, introduces elements of we can do the stealing stuff again, but you get a bit of dialogue attached. Okay. Not dialogue, but wall text explaining what they are and what the price is, and you can also spin them out. And there's 2 or 3 items, if you spin them out, they show to you a bit of deeper in the lore, if you're familiar with the series, the character clockwork. Like, one of them is literally, like, it starts off, like, say, I'm showing Mike my hand position, and if you rotate
he's doing the to be or not to be pose for anyone that's wondering.
I'm doing the claw. Nah. And if you rotate it around, it actually reveals that it's a reference to clockwork, so the way his, like... In universe, there's symbology that's associated with him, and you recognize that it's his like claw holding onto the world, and it's just that moment of like, oh, I know what that means because I'm familiar with the series.
See, that's good. I do think that definitely, if you're going to keep sprinkling these things in, these references back to a person or back to a particular location, you have to maintain a level of symbolic synergy. You have to be consistent with how you do it. If you're going to, just if you want, let's say there was a famous general that won a series of battles during a particular war, you could have it so that his personal heraldry was a set of twin axes crossed against each other on a shield. Every time you reference back to that general, something he did or his men did, just keep posting that in various locations. Just make sure that's the central icon whenever you want to add on that little bit of this is related to that guy, or something that that fucker did.
It doesn't have to be that direct as that. You can just kind of have it in passing, and then just kind of, if you're showing off like wartime stuff and you have that symbol though, you know that's that guy.
Yeah, and that's it's a good way of locking in what time period as well you're referring to, especially if you want to build something that's got a very large timeline that's spread over a long period. Looking at you, George R.R. Martin, you got to be careful when.
So to use your axe thing as an example, you can have it also how time periods perceive the value of that thing. So you could have an eroded sign for, like, say, if it's in the modern time, it's eroded because people don't really care to learn about that person, or it's not held in such high regard. But
or perhaps it's eroded if it's referring to something that has been forgotten about that individual.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, so I know I'll get in there. But it's sort of like, if you're remembering an ancient war hero, you're going to want to remember the good things, the parts which made him look heroic, gallant, the defender of the people. And yet, at the same time, no one wants to remember the part where he murdered an entire village because they didn't give him their grain on time. And, so perhaps the actual records of that have been lost or discarded, and that's what you encounter. And you can use, the eroded insignia as an idea that this hasn't been taken care of, this is something that's been lost or forgotten.
Or just not held in the same value to society anymore.
Or hidden, intentionally.
Yeah. Whatever you want to use it for. Use it for advantage to tell your story. Like, say, your character was once the proud general that led the battle to victory. Years later, because more conflicts have gone around, well, he's no longer the most fresh-faced of the victors that saved the world or your country.
What sort of perception has changed? So someone else got shown to be the grand hero.
Yeah, like newest person to save your country from the brink of war, or win the battle to save your land. They're now the newest face, and their heraldry is more prestigious, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. You could also do it sort of a way of like, the general himself had a second in command who was also very talented, but you could potentially run it. I'm going to go off on a tangent here.
Go on.
So you have a general and his second in command, both from rival tribes or clans within a kingdom. So I know I'm not getting so much political here, but it's sort of like the general is famous, and because he was the one that led the empire to victory, he drove off the invader or slew the evil monster, whatever you want to do. But the idea is, and so all the statues that were built were to honor him. And so all the records were talking about him. They did mention his second, but not quite on the same pedestal. But then as time moves on, the ages advance, perhaps not the general's clan, but the other second in command's clan, his group comes to power in the future. And suddenly their opinion is, well, I don't want to talk about the general, from these other guys.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Instead, here's a better idea. Let's say that it wasn't the general, and he wasn't incompetent. It was his second in command doing all the that achieved this victory in spite of the general. Let's talk about how amazing he is. And so that's where you could have it that all the statues get replaced and discarded, abandoned, locked away somewhere, and then all these brand new statues come up, and then you could have it so that as the story progresses, I don't know, your hero delves deeper into the mysteries of this kingdom, that they start seeing this and seeing these crossed axes more and more. Perhaps it was a mark at the foot of the statue in the main square, but it was secondary, it was a minor detail, but now it's in the forefront. And who's this strange figure wielding a great battle axe? I've never seen him before. And then the more you uncover, perhaps a heist going into the depths of the crown vaults. You don't just find the jewels there that you're there to steal, or the magical MacGuffin.
You find the actual book of the real history.
Yeah, or a giant statue of the old general. Him displayed in his full regalia, perhaps looking dilapidated and not as well maintained, because why would they? And then alongside it, the records showing this was what actually happened. And then it's a good way of displaying a lot of aspects of your world.
It's saying a lot without actually dialogue dumping on you.
And it definitely, when it comes to showing this kind of thing, showing is definitely better than telling. But yeah.
Well, sometimes you do have to tell if it is, say, a central part of your story to do have the expedition dump, but for the most part, we're talking about more background detail stuff you throw in to kind of make you go, oh, okay, that's part of that timeline to get to this where the world is. That explains possibly why, mentioning that. Let's go to something a bit different. So,
the storytelling itself.
Yeah, I I was going to say, like, the world's got hover cars. How did that come about? Oh, it's the war from, like, 34 years ago where...
Technology got advanced because everyone was pushing to gain that one advantage over the other.
Yeah, and that's why this is the leading nation of, say, hovercraft, is because we pushed it to the furthest during the war and was the first to crack it, and that's why other nations are still trying to, like, say, grasp what it is without actually being able to fully use the pattern.
Let's try and ignore the fact we're drawing a rather close parallel to nuclear weapons there. That's basically how the Manhattan Project works.
Maybe, but it's at least a way to kind of say.
Don't get me wrong. It's not a bad thing to draw upon and if you want to draw a parallel to it. But
I've never actually looked at the Manhattan Project outside of the Watchmen books. Is it a giant blue man?
Yeah, it's a giant blue man.
Of course it is.
It's always the giant blue man.
All right, so
Uncle Sam with the hat and everything.
So, where do you want to take this then?
So, I mean, we've already sort of jumped onto the part of making up our own like mini stories and things because with the whole general thing. So I don't know if you want to get back to that or if you want to talk a little bit more about an interesting way of, give another example of.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your favorite?
Okay, so I'm just going to get a laugh out of you. So
Full Metal Alchemist.
It's not Full Metal Alchemist. Fuck off. Probably when it comes to expanding, adding little stories, new concepts.
Did you say H.P. Lovecraft or
I'm
Lord
not
of the
going to
Rings?
say. I'm not going to say H.P. Lovecraft. I'm not going to say Tolkien. I'm going to. You're gonna keep trying to guess it until I say it. So it's gonna be the SCP universe.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, there you go.
No wonder you brought this up in the car the other day.
But no, when it comes to expanding your world lore, perhaps through display, through showing how it applies, or expanding it in small ways here, small ways there. I don't think there's actually a better modern day equivalent of it, because the thing is about mythology, especially real world equivalents, the tales around the campfire and so on, is they're created not by a single mind, they're created by 1,000 voices telling the same story 1,000 times over 1,000 years. And it's sort of why it's really hard to capture that same spontaneous nonsense in something you write as an author compared to what you might get in, say, real life, the tales of Baba Yaga, Rumpelstiltskin, or whatever, stuff like that. But with the SCP universe, you're kind of getting the same thing, because once again, you're having the thousand voices, the 1,000 minds writing the same story over and over again, or portraying the same characters over and over again, but doing it slightly differently, putting their own spin on it, and getting that same level of just, well, here's my take on what happened. I mean, and also talking about the same things. Who's the director? Who's the administrator? Who are the 5 council?
Yeah.
In what, is it is one of them really a giant talking cat? Is one, or a crazy old general, or a toy maker with the power to alter reality? Or is it really all just the
Plague Doctor?
Yeah. Talking about the Plague Doctor, is it really just this crazed demonic entity, or is it
Giant stone head that'll break your neck?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's where they appear in different stories, you learn a bit more about them. In their own individual articles, you won't find all that much. But finding out the Plague Doctor might relate. Best example I can think of is an entity called the Scarlet King.
Yeah.
In his actual. We don't actually find about him directly from his own SCP article. He doesn't have one, as far as I'm aware. We find out about him through things referring to him. So he appears primarily in the SCP talking about his brides or daughters, depending on your perspective, or both, depending on your perspective. And the idea that when the last one gives birth, he enters the world and destroys it.
Okay.
Now, that's the baseline. He's just generic destroyer being. But then, depending on other articles you can read, he might also turns out that, well, he's also actually an ancient deity that isn't so much a destroyer, it's just he's trying to return the world to a more natural state.
So he's Trigon from DC.
Perhaps, but like...
Giant red being that's birthed through a daughter. That's Raven's story arc from Teen Titans.
Yeah, but then it's sort of kind of interesting where else he crops up, because there's other SCPs that talk about, because the SCP universe is massive. It has its own canons, but there's other ones which talk about. I'm trying to think now. What's it called? Is it? Alagada, I think is the name I'm thinking of.
I've not played this game. No, it's almost 10 years.
It's basically this mythical alt reality city where all these crazy gods and demons live.
Okay.
Ruled by an entity called the Hand King. But at the same time, though, it references that, have you heard about the Great Red Destroyer god? And then they keep making references back to him, altering your perspective of him. Is he actually the villain that everyone thinks he is? Is he actually a benevolent deity that has been misconstrued? Has the power of belief corrupted him? Who is he really? And then it sort of develops this mentality around this character. But then also, just to expand upon that to the other religions in the SCP universe, the cult of the broken god, the idea that you learn who this special interest group are, but then you learn more and more about what they get up to. There are parts of them that are, relatively benevolent. They work alongside the SCP Foundation, and then there are those that work against it, wanting to revive the god in spite of the SCP Foundation. Then you have the Foundation itself. Are they the good guys? Are they the bad guys? Yes, no, depends on which system you're talking about.
Which AU you're in.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's something that large has multiple cannons, but it's like you're finding out
If I remember correctly, too, it's also kind of there's a central story, but there's also fan interpretations where it separates off.
I mean, technically, the whole thing is a fan interpretation. The only thing that's official per se is the game.
So it's basically just open source.
Sort of, yeah. It's basically open source storytelling.
So you could literally just jump in and be like, okay, so I'm going to take these building blocks and expand upon it in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, you have to put in an application to write for them.
Yeah.
Sort of present your own articles, and they'll, and the people that run the site judge whether or not they want to add it to the SCP universe. I've done it. Never managed to get accepted, but.
I keep trying.
Yeah, I'll see if I can keep writing something else. But it's sort of the idea that, like you said, it's basically open source. Theoretically, anyone can expand to the SCP universe. But that, in my opinion, is kind of the fun of it. That it is this constantly expanding world, and you might have different cross references and parallels and alt versions, and just. You see a lot of it where it's like, a reference to, it's 05-2 or, authorize this, or, Dr. Bright happened to be a part of this research team, or, Dr. Kondraki happened to be a reference to this one. They were involved on that project. And it's just finding out more and more of this information about these various characters.
So you're actually building your own kind of, conspiracy board to try and piece the thing together?
Yeah, you literally have to. Not even the Fate series has that level of nonsense.
No, that has way more nonsense.
But yeah, no, that's probably my favorite one, just in terms of I just can't stop reading them. So
there was one I had in my head then. I was like, I'm surprised you didn't talk about that, but then I fucking forgot what the series is called. It'll come back to me. I'll be like, oh yeah, it's that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. You want to go back to the world we created last time?
What, with the one we started talking about magic systems?
Yeah, the one we talked about, the world. It's about 6 elements involved. We got the four natural elements, then life and death involved.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. We can sort of expand upon.
I've come up with a name for the world if you want to use it.
Go for it.
Zenhexlia.
Zenhexlia?
Leah.
Zenhexlia.
No, so it's like Xenhexlia.
Zenhexlia.
Yeah.
Okay, we can work with that. So we're basically coming up with small references and stories that we can add into this world to expand upon it, make it, breathe some life into it. So, you know what? You go ahead, have a crack at it.
Yeah, I'll go first. So the first one I thought of for this is kind of a in-universe explanation about how, I want to say fire was the first of the magics to be discovered. Because it is like the first thing, in human, like the first, like one of the first major inventions was the discovery of fire, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
the first one to be mastered.
Yeah, like not even mastered, the first one to be grasp how to
use
conjure from it. And the way I thought about it is that possibly depict ancient times, say Roman era, just kind of have that as a baseline level. people who got caught in the war. There was with the word, not great flood, but sort of
some catastrophe.
Catastrophe, yeah. Second. I probably need a drink, but I'll give you this in a sec. So, some catastrophe happened where, say, a lot of natural resources are gone. Like, say, there's not much flints about, and winter's coming and stuff. Not to go George R. R. Martin or anything, but times are getting colder, and there's not much flint or, like, say, stuff to craft, make fire with naturally.
Yeah.
And people's emotions are getting high, it's getting heated, and one person just snaps, and out of nowhere, a fire emerges like that, just conjured through the emotion of like being highly frustrated, annoyed, passionate for trying to like say defend your loved ones from the cold, and that's how the first sparks were discovered of magic.
Okay.
And you can just have it like kind of as a fairy tale, like a simple family like trying to.
The story goes that 150 years ago, after the great, the great cataclysm. And you don't even really need to reference a specific event. I mean,
you just say
if you push,
you just say it's the age of winter was coming, and there was not much resources to keep stuff warm.
Yeah, like the age of like the Great Winter or the Great Frost or the Great Cold.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Just reference it's a nice age, isn't it?
Yeah. That in that moment of desperation, someone that spark was found, and the first gift of flame was acquired, and then have them all then emerge. You can even have it so that it was a particular, not catastrophe, but a particular form of strife that birthed each one.
I was going to say, just continue onwards, like after the great age of ice goes into the age of like fire, but unfortunately because the fire's been taking too much, they need water, and someone has to try and calm their emotions, and that's how they discover how to control water.
Possibly. The age of fire leads to a drought.
Yeah, so like that, everyone's learned how to master fire magic, and now all of a sudden there's fire everywhere, and it's just heating the planet up naturally. Not to go environmentalist or anything.
You don't even need to get scientific about it. Just say that the elemental balance of the world became, was
too
starting
strong.
it was destabilizing. So the idea that all these people utilizing this one element sort of gave it, broke the balance. So then, in response to the drought that was caused by it, suddenly, out of that chaos emerged water users, and then perhaps that resulted in a great flood.
They then need to mold Earth to control the water.
Yeah, to sort of like shore up the shorelines and defend it against the oncoming floods and restore the land. But
so on and so forth.
Yeah, and then you can even have coming after shortly after that. So perhaps with the recreation of these new mountain ranges, then those that lived at the very apex of them discovered that there was actually a new power amidst the clouds. A great storm might have been created by the effects of disturbing the very sky, the heavens themselves.
Possibly, but like I said, this one's just more how in universe it's just a fairy tale to explain how the first magics were found.
Yeah, and then you can sort of wonder how, first of all, how would those stories be told? I assume that it would be, did we go with guilds or academies for how they were teaching magic last time? I can't remember.
It was more like a clan system.
Yeah. So then you can have it so like the elders teach these stories, just, just to their use through, you can even start a particular story by, rather than having it be just a boring exposition dump, have it be that from the perspective of the main character, that it's their old grandmother, old Nan, that's spinning these stories around the hearth.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. It's more just, I'd say have it like it's a children's nursery rhyme. It's like how we know, like say, the Plague of London through Rings Around the Roses.
Yeah.
Working away that, make it seem like an actual thing that it's just common knowledge that people know but don't really think about.
Yeah, you can also, given the fact that you've got what 6 great sources of power controlled by a few individual people that are excessively powerful, you can imagine that there would be those that are in power or would have a great deal of control over the manipulation of this energy. So you'd imagine that these people would want to actually push this story as well. You can even have it be a religious thing that people believe that it's this. I mean, you can whether or not you want to actually devote an actual full-scale religion to it is just, or just have the occasional cult that believes that it was the gods that gave us fire in our time of need.
Well, if
you
you
know
want to talk about gods and that, start weaving that tale, man.
what you want me to weave it?
Yeah, go on. You seem interested talking about gods and religion.
Well, no, it was just sort of a. It was like, well, I believe we'll be looking at gods and actually creation myths for another time, but it was just sort of the idea that surely, because the important thing to note is where would these stories come from, who would be pushing them, and if one of the greatest sources of creation, of the source for power and influence comes from
Let me
religion.
ask you this: do you know where the origins of Ring Around the Roses come from?
Yeah, it's from the. Yeah, it comes from the. It comes from the Black Death. The idea that posies would protect you from it.
No, I mean the nursery rhyme itself.
I don't know what actually created the nursery rhyme. No.
It's just the thing. It's part of the world, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
just a thing that it's supposed to be in common knowledge. Just can't weave like that. If you want to expand upon it further, like details, you can go into like how the actual first fire was properly formed, and possibly how it may not line up with that. But that's more going into like expedition dumps rather than here's a neat thing to put in the world you can kind of think about.
I mean, possibly. I mean. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you could just run things like walking into a village and have a bunch of kids singing the song whilst dancing around, like, I don't know. Even like...
Fire pit.
Not even that. Just like have a bunch of kids just like hopscotch. Just have them like...
Singing it as they do with the jet day.
Yeah, doing like a little dance or like playing a game or something. Just kicking a section of dirt out of a patch of grass to create like a little game area, and they're singing the song as they do the thing, and
Yeah.
just doesn't have to be something you have to go particularly in depth in. You can do it if you want, but that sort of depends how much effort you want to put into building this world.
I'd say it's more just kind of, it's a neat thing to have there, but it's not going to be the main focus. You can make it the main focus, but I think for the stuff we're trying to tell, it's more like, here's some of the plot details to kind of give the world a bit more flesh without having to go full. Why is Ring Around the Rosies created by the Illuminati cult of the Catholic religion or some shit?
No, I don't think you need to go quite that far.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's an interesting idea. And then sort of, and then I suppose you could also include, just trying to think of it now. We're all doing this off the top of our heads.
Do you want me to say a second while you think about yours?
I mean, yeah, go ahead. But
So I've got another one. This is kind of picking up on the, not fairy tale aspect, but kind of the symbology stuff we talked about before.
yeah,
So we could have it that each of the major, sects have the generic tribal looking, like, fire, water, earth, wind, life, death symbols. But then have sort of like historically stuff he could weave in, being like, oh, that's the general symbol for, say, a particular leader of an era. So you could leave it so it's like, say, I don't know, a diamond represents when the Earth leader was in charge of like how the world was ran. So it's his mark on the world. So you could tell like the diamond shape that, say, I don't know, I'm trying to pull a name from their ass, like Cornelius or something. Like it was the great leader Cornelius. He's the one that shapes the world in his image in the era that he had, and he brought this to him. So if you see this symbol, it was through his means that it was created.
I mean, you could just have it be that he was a particular teacher that just happens to be a great teacher or a great master that uncovered a particular school style, whatever have you. And then just have it be that every time that you see that insignia, it refers to something. It either refers to perhaps his sect or his, or just his something that had an influence.
Or some sort of documentation to his like trademark at the end.
Yeah, just some reference back to his school of thought, his or when he was, or just a reference
Ideology and
to,
that.
yeah, stuff that he created when he was around, or his ideology. You can even have it so it's like a school of thought. Like a school, like, oh, you're an earth mage, but I'm a student, I'm a follower of the school of fracture or
Yeah.
whatever like that. it's like, oh, okay, so and like, oh, okay, so that explains why you have the diamond, the violet diamond on your brooch, on your as a clasp on your cloak, because that's the school you belong to. You read the works of the great leader Cornelius, or
so that thing, yeah, just kind of it's shorthand for like how you can gauge if a person thinks. Like, say Cornelius would say a stern leader, so you can tell by just the fact they've got it on them, they have a stern characteristic to them, or they aspire to be a stern person.
Stoic, but incredibly driven and impossible to stop when roused to action.
That sort of thing. It's shorthand for that.
Yeah, and you could even actually have, you could display it through the way people react to certain things, to seeing these insignia. So let's take fire, for example. You could have another great leader who's one of their great leaders of their schools of thought, who perhaps was more brutal and bloody. He was a bit of a monster. But there are still, who was fond of just outright scorched earth. Perhaps the School of Devastation or something. Xander
the Butcher or something.
Yeah. So, and then you could have it so that a particular group of soldiers, maybe, warrior casters who do follow his school of thought, and so you could have a troop of them march through a village, and because having got the burning skull, and then this is the mark upon their robes, and you just have people effectively closing up their homes and
moving out of their way and all that.
Yeah, like barricading, keeping out of their way, just giving them whatever they want, because they're genuinely terrified of these people, because they know their reputation just from the insignia upon their equipment.
Yeah. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just some sort of like visual shorthand that also kind of expands a bit further in the world.
Yeah. Just more interesting. Just a few interesting ways of going about it more than anything else.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep going, or?
You thought of one yet?
Honestly, I'm just sort of building. I was sort of going on and expanding upon yours. I completely dropped my own. But it was.
How about for your god myth, the one, because I know you like that. How about the tale of the Raven of Life?
The idea that there's all that.
Because I remember previously we talked about how I didn't want gods in this, but you wanted to hint that there could be, or possibly people believe there is.
Yeah, sort of the idea that the only evidence that we have of there being the potential for divinity was to ask, okay, so where did these fonts of power come from? I mean, do they occur naturally, or did something create them and gift us their power? The ability to manipulate them, are they a gift? And you can have a few schools of thought on this, almost like a philosophy.
Well, that's why I said you could have this be your in for that, is the Raven of Life is what the life casters believe in. You could say a white raven threw down after a great battle, and I don't know, pick one of the four elements that survived it, trying to heal the others, was around.
Almost like a Valkyrie style story.
Yeah, kind of. Not really taking the soul away, but it saw it in a need, and it came down, and I don't know, it saw like a phoenix, it healed it with its tears or something, and they realized, or that's for the water person retelling it. For the wind person, it came down, sword, and brought a healing wind upon it, and that's how they figured to transcend their element into healing magic for the life clone.
You could do it, yeah. You could build it sort of like a mythology. Perhaps it could be, yeah, like a raven or something similar, but just something that it's that singular moment of just it sort of almost makes it incredibly believable that something acted. I mean, you can even have it so, like you said, that there was no light or death magic prior to this, but it was the instance where it was that moment of greatest need that something reached down. I mean, you can even have it so this was a recent development. So the only reason why, and the reason they argue, well, why didn't we see this for fire, water, earth, and air? Why do we not see these stories told of these miraculous interventions during these? Well, because we don't remember that far back. Remember the four characters.
Hi, sorry for the abruptness of this, but we've already realised this after the fact. For about another 20 minutes, we did speaking about the subject of world building and stuff. That I realised that, the device we're recording on reached capacity, and so we had to stop. Sorry about that. We promise it won't happen again. Anyway, sorry for this. Once again. Anyway, I've been Zach of the Lawbreakers. That was Michael of the Lawbreakers. We'll catch you again later, and have a good one. Bye.